like a cauliflower puree. So it would look like penne Alfredo, but it would taste like, you know, a healthier version of that. She will tell people that, you know, the secret to being successful in this kind of a situation, because everyone goes, oh, how is it working with your wife? So for me, it's very easy because she's the boss at home and she's the boss at work also. She's not afraid to shoot me down, you know, which is good. We have that relationship. This was my dream, was to do wholesale breads for the city. Give a clue as to like who we were, right? In the name. So it needed to be a little bit light, not too serious, not too pretentious. Maybe Italian so that you get that vibe of
Chef Alex Sanchez, thank you for being here. And how are you really doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I think, as you know, we were talking about earlier, I just came back from this really great event in Bangalore, and it's just, you know, it was an industry event. It was an awards ceremony, but it's always so nice to see other colleagues doing great things, and that's always inspiring. Kind of makes you want to come back and tweak things and try a little harder. Yeah.
So which describes you best? Foodie, chef, entrepreneur, or world traveler?
I'm having a little bit of an identity crisis these days, I think. You know, when we opened Americano, I was very confident that I was a chef. I would have said I'm a chef because, you know, that was my first foray into being a restaurant owner, to being a businessman. And I didn't really know anything about being a business person, right? So for me, I was a chef who had somehow managed to become a restaurant owner. But now that we have 2 restaurants and I don't find myself in the kitchen as often as I did, it's hard for me to say I'm a chef. I mean, I know that I am a chef at heart. That's what I'm trained to do. But I think I see myself more as a mentor and just kind of a general spiritual guide. You know, we have like 170 employees, and my role has kind of shifted from being in the kitchen and checking in produce and tasting every plate, you know, every dish that goes out, to kind of coaching my team and making sure that they have what they need to do the things that I would have done myself, or that my partner Malika would have done.
Great, so you're multitasking and you're doing very well. We can all clearly see.
I'm trying my best. I don't know if I'm doing very well, but I'm trying my best.
Yeah.
And I think it's been really fun to kind of grow into that new role and learn some new skills myself.
So from Latin America to San Francisco to Mumbai, how's your journey been like? Would you tell us?
Yeah, so you know, I'm born in San Francisco. You know, and San Francisco in and of itself is kind of this, you know, very predominantly Latin American community. I mean, at least it was when I was growing up. My father is of Puerto Rican heritage, so that's where I get Sanchez, and that's where I get that side of me. But you know, I grew up in San Francisco. Went to a small school. Had a very tightly knit group of friends. But then when I started to pursue cooking, at first it was just kind of something that I thought maybe I'd be interested in because my dad was a pastry chef. So I thought maybe that would be something interesting for me. Once I really realized that it was something that I'd be serious about, that's when I enrolled in culinary school. I moved to New York, went to the CIA, and then pursued, I would say, more rigorous kitchens, the Michelin star kitchens, that almost more like, you know, getting your PhD, right? You know, like continued education, very, very, very demanding kitchens where, you know, you're taught to be perfect, essentially, or to try to be perfect. And then when I was pretty young, at about 26, I was kind of in between jobs, and I was experiencing probably a pretty emotional breakup, and as breakups tend to be when you're young. And I was at this kind of transitionary period in my life, and then that's when I got tapped to move to Bombay to be a chef, to open the table. And I mean, of course, I said no right away. But I think honestly, I didn't even know where Mumbai really was. And of course, when I told my mom, she was like, "The Middle East? Are you going to move to Middle East?" You know, like this tells you about my awareness of India at that time. But then eventually they kind of worked on me and brought me over, and I said I'd stay for a few weeks or a few months, and you know, it's been almost 15 years. But I think coming to India was the single most important decision that I've made in my life up until now, and it has definitely completely changed the course of my career. I think had I stayed in the States, I would have continued cooking and maybe matured a little bit more from a technical standpoint. But really, when I came here and I was young and I was forced to be a chef at a young age, which is always a decision I look back on, like, was that the right decision? But I think that's what really helped me to mature a lot faster and to learn how to be a true leader, which is the single most important skill for me right now.
You mentioned that your dad was a pastry chef.
Yeah.
Any particular favorite?
Well, it's interesting. So when I say pastry chef, I mean, basically he graduated from pastry school.
Okay.
And then he pursued it for some time, and then I think he gave up, and we became estranged. But there were a few things that he made that I remember him making for me on my birthdays and things like that. There were three in particular. One was key lime pie.
Okay.
So key limes are actually very similar to nimbu, what we get here, the small limes.
Yeah.
And you get them primarily in Florida, where my mom is from.
Mm-hmm.
So in the States, you buy like the pre-squeezed like juice in these plastic bottles, and on the back of the bottle is the recipe for the pie. But it's a really delicious pie. It's like a simple buttery crust with almost like a curd, like a lime curd filling, and then whipped cream. But it's like one of my favorites. So he made that, and then he would make these chocolate cupcakes that had like a little cream cheese or like a cheesecake filling. I forget what they're called, like black bottom cheesecake, swirl something. Yeah, anyways, I don't remember what they're called, but
it just seems like simple stuff, but
yeah, very homey,
yeah.
But really, really good.
Yeah.
And then he would make this like pineapple upside down cake, which is straight out of the 70s, like the most old school, kind of cheesy Conti dessert, but it was really good, and it's just really fun to like, you flip it over, right? That's what makes it upside down. So he always flip it over, and then I go, oh wow, the pineapple rings. But yeah, I think just having a male role model, my dad, being comfortable in the kitchen, is something that definitely made an impression on me, right? So I think because I wasn't a great student in high school and I wasn't a great student, I went to a year of traditional college, and I felt like I didn't know what I could do because I wasn't excelling at all academically. In fact, I was having some trouble with that. And I was a bit of a troublesome, teenager to some degree. So, cooking just seemed like something that I could at least do.
Yeah.
And then I ended up doing quite well. So,
what about your mom's cooking? Any favorite dish?
Yeah. So my mom, again, my dad left when I was young, and so my mom really took on many roles. In addition to also working full time to put me through school and put food on the table, like all parents have to. And so her cooking was always very simple, really tasty, but it was sort of that act of coming home from work and having food on the table within 30 minutes. I thought that was, at least for now, now that I have a son of my own and we have a busy life, like I have no idea how she was able to pull that off. But she was also, always into very healthy meals. So everything that we had was, lower fat, lower sodium, which to most people would translate to lower taste. But it was something that I was really happy to eat. And so like she would, instead of doing like a pasta Alfredo, which is like a really creamy, buttery sauce, she would make like a cauliflower puree. Okay. So it would look like penne Alfredo, but it would taste like, a healthier version of that.
That's a great idea. I think most moms would want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, she was doing it for herself as probably as much as she was doing it for me.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. And then, of course, I mean, my favorite dish that she made was a lasagna. So, like, when she wanted to kind of go all out and make something that would last a little bit longer, she would put together this lasagna with sausage and, made everything. And it was kind of this, it was like a special occasion kind of meal, but then it was also something that we could eat for days and days after. So I would always look forward to that, and I would like jump around when she said, okay, we're making lasagna tonight, So that's something that I love.
So do you miss anything about your life culture, cuisine back home in San Francisco?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's home, so I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's always that tendency to feel homesick. And what's interesting is even though I've been here for 15 years, I always say, well, back in the state, I always make these like comparisons. Oh, back in the States, it's not like this, or I still think in in dollar amounts.
Yeah.
So even if I see rupees, I immediately I have to like
Calculate.
calculate it into dollars. So I mean, I don't know if it's that I've not assimilated well into into my life here in India, or if it's just that I just because I learned all these things at such a young age, I'm just programmed and it's never going to change.
Mhm.
And there are frustrations, obviously, being an American, living here, feeling more comfortable with that culture, or just obviously identifying with it because that's who I am. But I never think about moving back. I think only okay. What would it be like hypothetically? But we have an amazing company here.
Yeah.
Professionally, I'm very well integrated into this, and to have to start over, I think would be impossible.
Yeah.
I've been a chef now for almost 23 years, 23, 24 years, and the more significant part of that, like I said, when I took over at the table and started creating a name for myself here, I don't know how that would translate back home. And legacy is something that I think about, especially as I get older. I just turned 40 last year, and at 40 years old, to try to become a chef in New York or San Francisco and make a name for myself, I think it'd be too difficult.
But not impossible.
Yeah, sure, not impossible, but
Yeah.
I think it's just I'm very well integrated here, and
Yeah.
it's something that I really
Yeah.
value.
Yeah.
So professionally, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
But then also, we like I said, we gave birth to our first son last year, our first child, probably our only child, and I want him to to be close to his Indian roots.
Yeah.
Maybe later, maybe the second half of his life, we'll go back to the States.
So that trip to Italy and that dish on mussels
Mm.
changed your outlook on food, right?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
tell us the story?
Yeah. So like I said, my mom raised me, and still she made time for us to do special things. And
Yeah.
I had this amazing, like I think a history teacher
Mm-hmm.
in I want to say 6th or 7th grade in elementary school.
Millions.
Yeah, middle years. Unlike the other history teachers who went by some kind of a curriculum,
Yeah.
he just sort of seemed to tell us stories. And he was the best storyteller. And he obviously was obsessed with Italian art history, Renaissancean art history. And so he would just kind of, he would spend like the first 10 minutes of class just like writing all the notes. And he was like, you're going to need to know all this for the test. So just scribble it down. And then we'd spend the rest of like the hour of the class, just listening to these wild stories, right? And I became so enamored with Italian culture just through these stories and learning about Raphael and Michelangelo and Donatello and all the greats. I think I probably still know more about Italian art history than any other subject that I learned in school. And so I was like, Mom, we got to go to Italy. Like, this is amazing. We got to check it out. And up until that point, I was like, I'd eat whatever my mom made because I kind of trusted it.
Mm.
But otherwise, I was a very, very picky eater. I couldn't go to like friends' houses and eat their parents' food. It would it would make me gag. And, so I was very particular. I'd eat like pizza. I'd eat boiled spaghetti with like the fake Kraft Parmesan cheese on it, the green can. This was up until I was probably 13, 12 or 13. So then we went to Italy. She took us to Italy that summer, and we went all around. And towards like the second half of the trip, we went to this town called Orvieto, which is up in the hillside. And the first half of that trip, I was literally eating tiramisu, gelato, and pizza. And pizza in Florence, in the 90s was really not that good.
Yeah.
Not much to speak of.
Yeah.
At least from my 12-year-old perspective. So we were in Orvieto, and we go down into this kind of cellar-like restaurant. Nobody speaks English. The menu's in Italian. And I could see my mom was having a blast, and I didn't really want to spoil it for her by being like this little brat and, saying, oh, I need, plain pasta, plain spaghetti or whatever it was. So I just kind of pointed to something, and the waiter said, "There's beans." So I was like, "Okay, I think I like beans. I think I can eat that." And then out comes like this mountain of mussels, these little like alien creatures, and simple, like however they prepare it, steamed in white
Yeah.
wine or something, and it was amazing. It really
Mm.
blew me away, and it was kind of this odd experience because you would think that having gone from being so picky, you might have like a very simple meal that would be a transition
Yeah.
into being more adventurous, but
Yeah.
instead it was the polar opposite of anything that I'd
Yeah.
ever experienced, and
I was
it,
by
it,
accident
it
also,
was by
I would say.
accident, and
Yeah.
it was scary,
Yeah.
and I remember being frightened by this plate of mussels, and nervous because I would always get really nervous going to friends' houses and eating their parents' food because I knew that I wouldn't like it. But I kind of was like, "Ugh," and then I tasted it and I was like, whoa, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I like finished it all up, and I did the scarpetta where you take the bread and you dip it in the sauce, and
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole thing. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. What else have I been missing out on? And I think for the rest of that trip, I was pretty open to trying new things. I don't really remember anything else, but then I came back and I started eating tomatoes, which was like a big thing for me because tomatoes have those like jelly-like seeds, and that was really grossing me out at some point. And so slowly and slowly, like I became more open. And it's funny because I still to this day I have a hard time with mushrooms,
Yeah.
but I use mushrooms all over the place because I've learned how to cook mushrooms the way that I like them. And I think as a chef, it's my responsibility to at least try everything,
Yeah.
or know how to make it
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
even if I don't like it. But yeah, I mean, obviously now I've probably tried most things, not everything, but I've tried most
And
things.
with accuracy and precision, I've
Yeah,
heard.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Um, but it was really really funny, and the irony of it uh, is that so we became very close with the Italian consul general, and so I told him this story because for him, like all these stories of Italy it's like music to his ears, and we were laughing one night because in Orviedo's in the mountains, right? It's literally a mountain
Yeah.
fortress. So the idea that I would have had mussels in a place that is nowhere near the sea, and that's what changed my whole outlook on eating, is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I'll never forget that experience.
So your business partner, Malaika,
Mm,
is your wife also.
yeah,
And you both bring different skill sets on the table,
yeah,
whereas restaurants and business is concerned.
yeah,
So does that work seamlessly?
yeah. I mean, she will tell people that the secret to being successful in this kind of a situation, because everyone's, oh, how is it working with your wife? So for me, it's very easy because she's the boss at home and she's the boss at work also. But for her, the secret to being successful is that we don't have really a lot of roles that overlap.
Mm,
So that at least helps us to avoid
yeah.
any you know anybody
Conflict.
butting
Yeah.
of heads.
Yeah.
But I also really value her opinion. And even though I think I'm good at what I do, I think she has a much better palate.
Mm,
She's also very confident with what she likes and doesn't like. And I think being the owner of a restaurant, or really being successful in any creative field, or one, let's say, because I don't know how creative being a restaurateur is. I mean, there are obviously moments of creativity, but
mm,
maybe we can get into that a little bit later.
mm.
Um, but I think being in any field where there is a lot of opinion
Yeah.
involved and everything is highly subjective, um, it's important to be a taste maker,
Yeah.
right? That you have to really have great taste. Something that I try to teach my chefs and anyone who works in the restaurant is you have to be a connoisseur.
Mm,
You really have to have um, a good kind of roadmap of the things that are really sophisticated, or you have to have the ability to turn something kind of mundane into something sophisticated. And she's really amazing with that. So if I put a new dish on the menu, like I'll taste it, and I kind of know that it's good, but I don't know like what it really needs or whatever. And then I put it in front of her, and then she's not afraid to shoot me down, which is good. We have that relationship. But she's also pretty good at saying she doesn't know how to get there necessarily. That's my job,
yeah.
and she'll give me that space
Roadmap.
to do
Yeah.
that. But she'll say, I think it's missing something like this, or this is what we can do to kind of bring it. This is what it needs to kind of be brought to life a little bit. So I really value her opinion, and I think she also really values my experience. So what's great is she has really good experience in luxury hotels, and she worked for like a high profile tour operator as well. So she has a really good pulse on that. But I've basically only been doing restaurants since I graduated high school. So I have a very specific skill set, which she also values. So, and I've worked in great restaurants. So
how did you two meet?
We met actually long back, briefly when we worked at the table together.
Okay.
But really, we kind of met almost by accident. She was eating at the table, and I was getting off work, and then we became friends, and then we eventually became
so all
husband
great
and wife.
Things are happening by accident, right, with you?
I think so. Well, they didn't. Okay, it wasn't that it happened by accident, but I think by making one choice, which was to come to India, everything else kind of opened up for me. Yeah.
So where does your creative and artistic inspiration come from?
Yeah. So again, I think coming back to this idea that I could be having a bit of an identity crisis. I do think that chefs have to be creative. I think creativity is not necessarily something that you can always control either.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite sort of sayings, it's not really a quote, but I'll paraphrase, is from Jacques Pepin, very, very famous, French chef. And he says, don't worry so much about being creative, because whatever you do, it's going to be your own creativity. It has to be. So if you make a roast chicken and I make a roast chicken, they're going to be different. You might put thyme and mustard on yours, and I might stuff butter under the skin. We're both roasting a chicken, but our own vantage point, our own history, let's say our own grandmother's cooking, whatever is going to come in through what we do, and that is the creativity. So, creativity isn't necessarily the destination as much as it is part of the process, or it is the process itself, maybe, of just creating. And so, for me, I spend so much time on the technical part of it that I don't necessarily know how much of it is art. I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, cooking is art," and there are plenty of chefs that I think that do take cuisine into a very artistic direction.
With presentations and stuff. Right?
Yeah, with presentation, but also philosophically, the way they think about it. It's not just that they're preparing something that's going to give people food. I mean, they want to challenge perceptions. They want to challenge thought. I don't know if that is the way that I view cooking, only because I think, again, now that as a restaurateur, I think of cooking as part of the recipe of the sort of the human experience. And when you create a restaurant, it's not, at least for me, it's not just a temple to come and experience my food. The food is something that might bring you back. It might make you feel comfortable while you're there. But you're there really to meet friends, or to maybe to escape life for a couple hours, or celebrate an anniversary or birthday, or everyone has a different reason. You're there to seal a deal with a potential client, whatever it is. And so we're facilitating an experience that is going to be different for everyone. And so it's a little presumptuous of me to think that the food is the reason that they're there. So in that sense, obviously we care a lot about what we do, whether we're making drinks or we're serving our guests, or if I'm putting a dish on a plate. But I don't really want that to be, it's not art on a wall and you're visiting my museum. Art on a plate, it's you're there to have a
feel and experience.
Yeah, exactly. And the food is part of that. So is it art? I don't really know, but and I don't know if I'm really answering your question properly, but I think that for me, creativity is just it's just something that happens. And if I'm doing an interpretation of let's say a taco, I mean, I'm gonna think traditionally what is the best tortilla that I can make, and I'm gonna work backwards from that, and how to make a great tortilla, and what I put on it, will be the cumulative result of all my years of experience. Absolutely. If that's creative or if that's technical, I don't know.
I got it. Everyone has different outlook to how they work.
Yeah.
So, what has been your experiences setting up the table the Magazine Street kitchen,
Mm.
the bread, and have these helped in your venture too?
Yeah. So, one thing that I really respect about Jay and Gory, which was the biggest gift that they gave me, was that they put a lot of faith in me
Mm-hmm.
and they trusted me. Probably at a time when maybe they shouldn't have. I mean, let's say it was a big risk because I was quite young. Um, but it really, by having their faith and knowing that I kind of had to be a bit self-sufficient in doing a lot of these things,
Mm-hmm.
um, it gave me the confidence that I needed. And sometimes all you need is confidence to be
Yeah.
successful. And of course, I mean, a little hard work and self-belief. But setting up a table was really difficult for me because it was a very fast process. I moved here at the end of 2010, and like they wanted to open the restaurant 3 weeks later. Obviously, they had done all the groundwork. It
Yeah.
wasn't just start to finish. They had done all the groundwork.
Yeah.
And there was a chef, Chef Viraf Patel, who was already in place, and so we had a lot of
Support.
the support we needed to get open, but it was just it was very intense because I was also leaving home, and I was adjusting to living in India, and so it was a really intense.
Mm-hmm.
But having those goals and having those that rigid framework, it made it more possible,
Mm-hmm.
and I think also that's kind of times where creativity really kind of gets squeezed out,
Mm-hmm.
when you have these limitations and these challenges. Um, and then I had moved to New York briefly and came back, and around that time, Gory had this really cool mill in Baikal that they wanted to transform into some kind of catering kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
But selfishly, I don't like catering. I don't like catering,
Yeah.
and because I was moving back, I was kind of thinking, well, what could we do that might be worthy of the space, but that's not catering. So I was like, well, if we build a really cool kitchen, we can do all sorts of things. We can do pop-ups, we can do classes, we can do all sorts of things out of this. And because it was a big space, um, probably had to do other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's around the time that I had received a baguette.
Okay.
A friend of mine, a chef friend of mine, had given me a baguette. And it was the first baguette that I had tasted in the country that tasted like a baguette, because a lot of times you would see a baguette, it was
Yeah.
shaped like a baguette,
Yeah.
but it just tasted like
Bread.
pow. It was just soft bread. This had flavor. It was fermented. It had the taste and the crust of a real baguette. And I was like, whoa, more people need to experience this. What's
Mm-hmm.
up with that? And up until that point, I had made maybe a little bit of sourdough. We're talking like 2011. This was far before the pandemic when everyone
Yeah.
was making sourdough at home. And so we were making all of our own breads, but we had more success with the soft breads because of the humidity in the air. And so that's why the bread at the table was always the brioche, the really soft bread, because obviously people like soft bread, but it also just lends itself very well to the climate. So when I tasted this baguette, I was like, okay, there's something. I met the baker, Chef Rachel, and I was like, why don't you have a bakery? Why aren't you doing more of this? And she's like, well, it's something that I would like to do, but there's really no demand and there's no bakery. And I was like, okay. So that's when we decided that, not only would we have Magazine Street Kitchen be this kind of like concept show kitchen where we would do pop-ups and things, but that also within that we would have Mag Street Bread Co., this was my dream, was to do wholesale breads for the city. So every restaurant that wanted to have, a bread basket, bread baskets are not very common anymore, but every, restaurant that wanted to serve burger buns or have sandwiches or anything would, this is very common in Europe and in the States, they would buy their breads from us and use it on their menu. Unfortunately, what I realized was, there was just such a, these were artisan breads, and they required a certain minimal cost for the business to sort of work. And so many restaurateurs were very price conscious. And I mean, I get that. If you're selling a burger bun for, let's say 100 rupees or 80 rupees, that's without any toppings on it. That means their final selling price obviously is not where they need it to be. So
all learnings.
all learnings. But it's like I really wanted it to be successful from that point. But then when I left, and actually during the pandemic, that business turned out to be a lifeline for food matters for that
Of
company,
course.
right?
Yeah.
But they found a huge niche with the retail market. So, and I think it now does very well with the retail market. So I think there was definitely some good things that came out of that, and it has become very beneficial and a big part of that company.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a great bakery back in the Bay Area called Acme Bread, and wonderful breads, and they do tremendous sales not only with retail but mainly with wholesale. And most restaurants in the city that don't make their own bread, they buy bread from Acme.
Yeah.
Or at least they did back when I lived there.
Mm.
And so that was always something that I thought would be cool, but that didn't turn out. But all learnings, and I mean, I'm super proud of what we were able to achieve. And I think the quality of the bread that was coming out. This was in 2014 or 15. Up until that point was pretty unheard of.
Yeah. Also, on the Americano menu, you have San Francisco sourdough bread.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Any reason why you named it that way?
Well, San Francisco style sourdough tends to be a little more sour.
Okay.
It's like it's just a taste that's in my blood, and it's something that I look for. I mean, I think a lot of people do. A lot of restaurants now are doing a good quality sourdough. This just tastes like home. I don't really know how else to describe it. It's the taste of the sourdough that I grew up eating, and the taste that I crave. And so even though it is very much not San Francisco sourdough because we're in Bombay and all the cultures from the starter are floating around in the air here, but and it's Indian flour and Indian water, but it's that taste of sourdough from home. So.
Right. So back then, when you started off, how hard or difficult was it to get the pulse of Indian gastronomers? Not for bread, but for food.
For food, yeah. It was tough, and I had this conversation a lot with people because I was able to catch on quite quickly, and sort of figure out which dishes were working and which weren't, and what flavor profiles were and which weren't. But a lot of times it was oversimplified. Oh, how do you cook for Indians? And I always felt that it was people were kind of saying like, oh, you're cooking, like you're almost cooking down to people. And I found that a bit sort of derogatory almost. For me, it's my responsibility to make sure that everyone that comes in is enjoying themselves. And that's like the most simple way to put it. And, I liken this to being in New York. Every borough is different, but every neighborhood in Manhattan is different, right? So if I have a restaurant on the Upper East Side, I'm going to be cooking very different than if I'm in, Lower East Side, okay, or Chinatown. So I think it's just really about understanding your demographic. I mean, honestly, you probably cook different if you're in Bandra or Colaba or Bangalore and Mumbai, right? And so it's just really about understanding who's coming in, and India is not really it's not really a tourism based market, right? So you're trying to make regulars. You're trying to create a little community of people that want to come back. So you got to know people's preferences and know them by name, and so it's kind of the same. If you had someone over for dinner and they're a vegetarian, you're not going to make a roast beef, and so I think I'm also like hypercritical of myself. And when a dish came back to the kitchen and wasn't finished, I wanted to know why, and just again, because we opened so quickly and everything was moving so fast, the menu evolved very quickly to reflect the kind of people that were coming in and what they liked. And I mean, some dishes tended to be a little bit bolder in flavor. I wouldn't say spicy, but maybe bolder in flavor than I would normally cook, because I was trained with very French technique, French influences, which tends to be a little bit more on the subtle side. But it was tricky to learn some of the proclivities, but otherwise it was a fairly smooth process.
Also, talking about India, did you get a chance to taste the different diverse regional cuisine? Have you tried the street food? Is there anything that you like? Any favorite Indian dish?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point I've tried most of the stuff in Bombay. I love like all the kind of funny bits that you get back in Muhammad Ali Road, especially around around Eid. So that love that stuff. I like a lot of the chaat. I have an issue with raw onion.
Okay.
Like it just affects my system in not a very pleasant way.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that I love pav bhaji, but you can't eat pav bhaji without raw onion.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't work. It doesn't
Yeah.
taste the same.
Yeah.
And so I just have to be in that mood. It's the same with sev puri, bel puri. Like
Yeah.
it's not the same without the raw onion.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that really affects me in a negative way physically. So I just have to be in that mind frame.
Yeah.
But I love it all. And early on, obviously, whenever I'd meet someone new, they'd invite me home, and I'd taste all these different kind of regional styles.
Yeah.
And I think to this day, my single favorite thing is a classic biryani, like a North Indian biryani.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I had some great biryani in Bangalore actually, with the short grain rice. But I think I still prefer the long grain, the basmati rice. I mean, I love biryani and I love rice.
Yeah.
And so biryani was, I'd had it at Dumphooked
Yeah.
at the Moria ITC. And I mean, I was almost moved to tears. It was so simple. They open it table side, so there's a little bit of theater.
Can you handle the spice?
Yeah, but this one is, I mean, it's a little spicy. It's not too spicy. They use that yellow chili, so I mean, it is spicy, but I don't find it like overwhelming. Sometimes you have the biryani with like lots of chili powder and you kind of choke a little bit. This was just perfectly balanced, and oh my God, yeah. I mean, I could eat it now.
So is there an Indian dish that you cook?
No.
No?
I have had very bad luck cooking Indian food. I don't understand how spices come together. I think it's like it's something that needs to be ingrained in you from when you're young. And I have this really terrible experience also of trying to make dal at home before I knew how to use these pressure cookers. So I had like made the dal, and I didn't let the pressure cooker cool off, and I forced this thing open, and it just exploded with hot dal all over the place. I burnt my arms, I burnt my face. So I stay away from it. I leave that to the professionals, and I do the food that I do.
So being a chef, do you cook at home or you simply stay away from the kitchen?
I've gotten a lot better,
Mm-hmm.
but I have this tendency to want to use every utensil in the house when I cook. So the cleanup is always a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
I'm like, I take spoons, like I'm in the kitchen here, and I'll taste whatever I'm cooking with a spoon, then I'll toss it in the sink.
Yeah.
And the whole time my wife is just over there like, do you think that someone's going to come behind you and be cleaning all this? You have to clean all this up when you're done. But yeah, I use every pan, every pot, every strainer, everything. And then by the end of it, the sink is just this mountain of dishes. But now I've gotten a lot better at kind of these one pan miracle dishes. So
you cook sometimes?
I do. I honestly, like, we just went to Japan recently, and I got a bunch of ingredients, and I was really inspired to come back and cook at home. And both of my kitchens actually, Americano and Otra, that it's not a lot of space for me, because we have everyone from the head chef down, and everyone has their station. So when I come in, they get to have all the fun, and I just kind of come in and make sure that things are under control. So at home is the only place I really have my own station to cook.
And what is the strongest emotion you feel when you're cooking?
Actually, it's like clarity. I think in the beginning, when I started cooking, there's that rush that you get, and that adrenaline is definitely something you can become addicted to very easily. And I do feel that, but now also I think I'm so experienced with that feeling that it's not like as, it's not as intense as it was. So really what I find when I'm cooking is just this kind of clarity. I'm just thinking about what I'm doing. I'm kind of in the matrix, I know when things are going to be ready and what I need to do next. And I just feel kind of at peace.
And what has changed in the food industry in the last decade, according to you?
There's been some really important changes.
Like?
I think the most important has been the way that we look at our teams, that it's a more collaborative environment, that it prioritizes the well-being of the team, both while they're at work, but also, scheduling in such a way that they're able to have a bit of a life outside of work, and to find some of that balance. I mean, work-life balance it's become a bit of a catchphrase, but it is really important, particularly in our industry where people work long hours,
Yeah.
at least historically. Also, the way that we view like motivational techniques. I mean, by that I mean that I used to scream at my team,
Yeah.
and that was very commonplace. And now, obviously, we talk about toxic work culture,
Yeah.
and people have been canceled as a result of that. But I think what we just really mean is like seeing people, that you don't see them as someone that you can exploit
Yeah.
in order to achieve your goals, but that these are people that you're working with in a collaborative way,
Yeah.
even if they work for you.
So you see their strengths and
You see their strengths, but you see them as people,
yeah.
and everyone has these needs, and also everyone has their limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having a kid has also given me a bit more empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I have to remember that whatever experience that I have is a privilege, like going to a good culinary school or, working at great restaurants. This is a privilege that not everyone has.
Mm-hmm.
So it's my job to really be able to explain and teach. That's what I need to do. And also, the more that I observe my son and how he's developing, we have a lot of young kids that work with us, from 18, 19 years old up to 22, 23, 24. And brain development is ongoing up until you're 26, 27, 28.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm literally working with children who are not fully developed. I mean, of course, when I was 18, I thought I was fully developed. I was an adult, and I'm sure every teen does. But I'm dealing with kids, even if they're living on their own, far away from home. And so, it's my job to really help them make good decisions, to develop good habits,
and motivate them,
and to motivate them, and to not steal that fire inside them. And that's what happens when you yell at people. I mean, there are people that have worked for me in the past that I'm confident now do not cook as a result of their bad experience with me as a poor leader, poor manager. And that makes me sad, because that doesn't reflect who I am as a person. It literally is just me repeating the same crap that was taught to me at a time when it was acceptable, and kind of perpetuating that negative cycle. And I think that is one of the most important changes that's happened over the last 10 years, is just recognizing, maybe not changing it entirely, but recognizing that this is an issue, and that we can be better. Because why should you as a leader be any different than you as a person? But I would argue that most of these chefs who are screamers in the kitchen are not bad people. They're just bad managers, bad leaders. The other important change has been this willingness to collaborate, peers. I mean, I think, and maybe this has been happening abroad for longer, but I feel that when I first moved to Mumbai, it was a very secretive environment. It wasn't inclusive. It was like, these are my recipes. This is my business you're encroaching on. The idea of a newcomer was not welcome.
Yeah.
And now, and like I told you, just came back from this event in Bangalore. You see that there's so much appreciation for other people's skills and contributions. There's less insecurity. There's a more inclusive kind of environment. And I personally I'm very inspired by particularly the young chefs that come in, because they have this incredible motivation and ambition. They want to do things. They want to change things. And I'm not old, but I am a little bit set in my ways.
But their energy is contagious.
It is contagious. And they think that everything is possible.
Yeah.
Where I kind of have this jaded thing like, well, it's been tried, so why try again? So I think that it's really nice to see you've got the old timers, and then you've got these ripe young kids with lots of energy. And I say kids, but they're probably in early 30s or something. But it's really, really, really special to see this collaboration.
But now also, there's nothing secretive now, right? With the exposure of digital media, where you have so many series of recipes series going on. So I think it's all open to everyone now.
Yeah, and that's its own challenge, right? Because then how do you find originality? But no, I just think people are are aware now that you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah.
And also that we're all going through the same stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so it's better to kind of commiserate and have buddies through the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking with Riyaz Samlan, and he's like, the one thing that we all have in common is that we're all insane. We know the odds against us, and yet we all open restaurants.
Absolutely. So you mentioned about the toxic work culture.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's amazing that you accept your mistake and you make changes, because lots of people don't do that, and it's very hard to make changes, especially after a certain age of. So what happened really? Did someone come up and tell you that what you're doing is wrong?
Well, there were warning signs the whole time.
Okay.
You know, like if you make someone cry at work,
Yeah.
that's not a sign of you being skilled or you know, a hot shot.
Yeah.
It's a sign that you've damaged someone.
Yeah.
Temporarily or permanently, who knows? But it's not a good thing. I never went home and celebrated making someone cry, but I think there's that bravado, or that's something where you're just trying to make everything perfect. And I was also working for people, and I think that feeling of like, well, this is going to fall on my head if these people make a mistake. That's my reputation, or I'll look bad in front of my employers or something like that. So I didn't really analyze it. I just kind of kept doing it. And then there were a few people that that would walk out on me during service, or this happened many times, and I was just like, well, they're weak. They can't take it. They're in the wrong industry. And I know that I'm not alone. I don't feel like I'm the only chef on earth that's experienced this, sadly. But then I think when we started to transition into becoming restaurant owners, there was a really beautiful process of, coming up with the employee handbook even, or coming up with like a company mission statement. And this was like an intense period of maybe a few months where, before maybe you're in the middle of like the fit out process, or you're doing construction, but this is before menus and trials and all this kind of stuff.
The clear communication has been.
Yeah. This is where you're really like putting all the DNA in place for like what this it's gonna be more than a restaurant, right? It's like what this company symbolizes.
Yeah.
And we realized very early on, and this is mostly because of my wife and her positive experiences in the workplace, and also just her personal beliefs and philosophy, where employees come first.
Yeah.
The well-being of our team is number one.
Yeah.
And so we made that promise to ourselves and then to our future team,
Wonderful.
in writing, right? But then we would open, and I'd be in the middle of service, and I'd start screaming at people again. And it was completely contradictory. And I'm telling my team, "Oh, yeah, your family and all these things," and I'm just being a total hypocrite. But it was really easy to see, and Malaika would definitely hold me accountable, but she would also say, this is also not good for you.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, you're youngish now. Well, I was 34 or something.
Yeah.
30, yeah. But you're not going to be forever, and this is just not the way. And so really, it was like the pandemic was like when it all stopped completely, because at that point we realized, look, number one is the well-being of our team.
Absolutely.
Because at that point it was also a matter, at least we thought, right, of potential life and death, right? It was about the health, the health of the team. We shut the restaurant, and we had like a good 4 months where we really just kind of thought about our priorities, reprioritized things. And when we came back, like the team thought that something had happened to me, like maybe I had some kind of brain surgery or something while we were gone, because I just stopped. And there's some times where I lose my cool, but now me losing my cool is like barely raising my voice. And I think you also have a lot more power, because they know that you're showing restraint, and they know
they need to do better,
that they need to be better. And that's how you, that's how you, I think also instill a bit of loyalty in people, that they see that you're trying for them, they should try for you. And it is a relationship versus an exploitive relationship.
So we've had other chefs on our podcast, and all of them have spoken about how difficult it is to retain talent. Do you face that too? Have you cracked it?
Yeah. So I have a bit of a sort of a philosophy on this. See, if you've done your job well, your team is not going to stay with you forever. This is the reality. Like I said, we're mentors. And as much as I would love to think that I'm training my team to like take over my company one day, the reality is I would hope that a lot of people that come to work for me have ambition to do their own thing, or they have ambition to follow their own path or their own dreams. And my job is to give them all the skills that they're going to need, or at least give them as many skills as I can to prepare them for their future. Again, it's like raising a kid, right? And at a certain point, they're going to be ready to leave the nest. And, you know, it's hard. You know, there's a bit of that ego hit where you're like, whoa, why are they leaving me? Especially if they go work for someone else. My God, it's like, you know, it hurts so badly. And you think, well, I just trained this person and now they're going to take all those skills and then they're just going to enhance someone else's company. And these are all natural feelings to have, but then it, you know, it only reflects positively on you that, you know, you're a breeding ground for talent and that you nurture talent. And, you know, hopefully what that signifies is that you attract new talent. And I also feel that at a certain point, most people will have contributed everything that they can. You know, until they go out on their own and do their own thing and are challenged in new ways, you know, maybe after 7-8 years, they've really kind of stopped being able to contribute to your company. And by getting them out into the world and, you know, exploring their path and their new opportunities, you're going to bring someone new in who can actually change the company and make it better. Yes, there's that period where you have to train them, and yes, there is that adjustment and all that. But I think it's kind of the natural circle of life. And if you're having trouble retaining talent for, let's say, less than a year, you're not keeping people engaged enough. Maybe you're not teaching enough, or, you know, something's probably wrong within that. But, you know, if people have a hard time retaining talent, let's say after 3 years, if someone's given you 3 years of their life, you know, and they leave professionally, you can only be thankful. They give you 2 years. Honestly, I say, if you want to come work for me, you stick around for a year. I'll help you find a job wherever you want. And most people do stick around for at least a year. But I would say, you know, our core team has been with us since the beginning. It's just, you know, talent, we rely on it. And, you know, in the service industry, especially, or in restaurants, like I said, I have 2 restaurants, but I have 150 employees, you know. There's a lot of people, a lot of manpower that is required to make this experience happen for the guests, more so than in other industries. And it's challenging, and managing all these people is challenging, but that's our job. You know, I mean, that's what's required. So holding on to people for less than 6 months, you got a problem. At least a year, you're probably doing fine. And if you're concerned that people are leaving after 6 years, you should at least be proud that they're going out into the world, and they're going to reflect positively on you. I think it's a great restaurant, and I think it's because more than the food, more than the drink, more than, you know, the music, or it's just that when you walk in, you got a lot of happy people smiling at you and making you feel like you're in the right place. The people talk about vibe, and I know that Americano definitely has this energy that like is pulsating. You know, it's a bit loud and there's lots of people. It's heaving with people. But even at Otra, that's a little bit more subdued. They both have this warmth, you know, and I can only take so much credit for that. I mean, I think Malaika has a lot to do with that. Again, like just the philosophy that she's breathed into the company and how we treat people. But again, you know, we're people serving people. So, you know, we're not servants serving people. And as soon as you look at your team as collaborators and you empower them to make decisions and to, you know, to make a positive impact on the guests, they will.
How did you stumble upon the names Americano and Otra?
So, well, when I first moved here, there was this song, Papa Americano. And I always thought it was funny because I was the Americano, right? But we knew that we wanted to open, you know, an Italian-inspired restaurant. Maybe not truly Italian, but, you know, inspired by just that generosity of spirit of Italian food culture. And we started looking into like Italian names, you know. So then I would go on like Google Translate or whatever and just start translating every word. And I think I made like this word cloud once of all the potential names that we came up with. And, you know, they were all kind of bad. And there were some good ones, but it needed to kind of um, give a clue as to like who we were, right, in the name. So it needed to be a little bit light, not too serious, not too pretentious. Maybe Italian, so that you get that vibe of, okay, there's probably some Italian inspiration going on here. But nothing really felt right, and everything felt very contrived and overly thought. And then I was just kind of joking once to Malika because this, I was thinking of this song, and she was like, no, that's a terrible name. And we told some other people, and they were like, what is it, a cafe? Like, what do you mean, Americano? And almost everyone hated the name immediately. But then I was kind of like, it's nice. It's a little like there's a little bit of humor there. I'm the Americano, okay, and it's a little self-deprecating. And we knew that it was going to be a cocktail bar, and the Americano was the first cocktail created with Campari. So there was a lot of just little things that it made it feel right. And of course, when we first opened, people would walk in and go, okay, this is a cafe, but now, I mean, no one thinks about it. Americano it has like, it's a well-established brand at this point, but all the things that we were worried that people wouldn't like about it didn't matter, and people quite like it now. And of course, once we looked a little bit further into that song, so that the song that we know is like a remix of an original song. There's actually in I think Calabrian or Sicilian dialect, so Southern Italian, and it's basically this conversation between these two guys. That's like, oh, you think you're so cool because you wear jeans and you drink whiskey soda? You're an American. You're an Americano. And I just liked all that. I liked all the little subtleties of that. And then when we were thinking about the name for this, again, we went around the sun a million times, and we thought about hundreds of different names, and that process is always very stressful because I obsess, and Malika just like hates going in these cyclical conversations. So, but usually the best answer is the simplest one, and this is our other restaurant. It's the other side of me, Sanchez, and it was just other. So Otra. I mean, that was just the most obvious kind of choice for that. And there were concerns also because it's easier because there's the tra in Hindi, I think, right? But the fact that it is Americano, you can say kind of in any accent in it, you get it. But Otra, an American would say Otra, which does not sound very good. So there was a little bit of risk just because of the way it's pronounced. But I think here it's fine because it's I guess a syllable that people are, or a consonant or something that people are comfortable saying. But we really like the idea that, again, no pretension. It's our other restaurant, and it's another side of us, and also it reflects that we've grown in the last 6 years. We're a bit more mature. The space here, as you can see, is a little bit more sultry, a little bit more mature. It's not as loud. It's not as rambunctious, and it's got its own kind of personality.
Are you loved by customers and critics?
That's a really good question. I think for a lot of my career, I have been concerned with being liked. Will people like my food? Will people like my restaurants? Will people like me as a person? I'm really, really lucky that I've been here for so long, and I feel really comfortable in my skin now. And part of that is because I've made lots of mistakes and burnt some bridges and worked my way back from that. And people do respect me as someone who's been around for a while. And so I think that there is respect, but I think that also in the same way that I've kind of grown into this person who leads the way that I want to be treated, I think I'm a good colleague. I think I'm supportive of others, and because I genuinely do respect others, and I think that is a good way to make friends, as long as it's coming from the right place. Not to just kind of pander to everybody and be fake. And then critics, there aren't a lot of critics. I mean, I think our harshest critics are people that have a bad time and go on Google or Zomato or Instagram, and of course that always hurts because you never want to make anyone unhappy. I mean, we're in the service business, the hospitality business. Making someone unhappy is literally the antithesis of what we do. But I think I'm liked. I don't know if I'm loved, but I think I'm liked.
So what's been your learning from the Sophomore project? What is it, and has it helped you in this food business?
Yeah, second projects are tough, and I'm observing this all over the place. I mean, for me, I can speak personally. It's been very difficult, but if you have a really successful first restaurant, maybe in a successful first business, the sophomore hit, the second one is tough because you're bound to overthink everything, because you're like, I effortlessly was successful the first time around. And for us, I wouldn't say it was effortless, but we did what we thought we wanted. We wanted a restaurant like Americano, so we made it. And it just, for whatever reason, right place, right time, it took off. The second one, we were like, okay, well, we did this here, that was a mistake. Okay, should we repeat that? We didn't have a clean slate, and so I do think that we overanalyzed everything. But in doing so, you see that there are actually some, there are some things that are very polished and very well thought out and are total improvements on Americano.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some things where I think we kind of lost our way. And, of course, now we're almost 8 months or 9 months at Otra, and we're kind of working to reclaim the things that we want about, that we want in a restaurant without sort of overthinking, or this is going to work for the awards or the critics, or, just, again, kind of have that confidence in what we do. But it's been a really amazing process because, we also, we had, our son was born, and then, a couple months later, we opened this restaurant.
And you're going to be completing a year, right, in May?
Yeah, we're going to be completing a year in May. Our son just turned a year.
Okay.
So it really happened in tandem, and I wanted to be present for my son and to like see him going through these really, amazing developmental periods in his life, and I wanted to be a dad. But I also wanted to be present for the team, and obviously when you open a restaurant, you have to be there. You have to, react quickly to feedback and all that. And so it was tough because I felt like I was neither a really, really focused dad, nor was I a really, really focused restaurateur. So that was really tough. I wouldn't recommend necessarily having a kid in a restaurant at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, now that things have kind of cooled off a little bit, both at home and at work, we have a little bit more clarity and a little bit more space to think. And we are making some changes to Otra that I think will make it a more compelling restaurant.
So what are the unique flavors you bring here, and how is it different from the table or the Americano?
So, the table is what we say globally inspired, right? So that was kind of just me cooking things that I missed. If it was like kind of Asian inspired, Japanese, Mexican, whatever, it was just kind of all there.
Okay.
When I opened Americano, I wanted to do something a little bit more focused because, as a restaurateur, as a chef, you want to do everything that you know on one menu.
Yeah.
Right? Because that might be your only shot. As a restaurateur, you're like, I can do one thing that I like on this menu because I'm going to open another restaurant and I'm going to focus on these flavors over there. So that's what makes it, if you have many ideas, it's better to create concepts around them versus just kind of, data dumping everything on one menu. So, Americano was more my passion for making fresh pasta, obviously my passion for Italian food culture, and, who doesn't love pizza? So we do some of that. Otra, the other side, is kind of an exploration of the food cultures, Latin American food cultures that I grew up eating. When I first started cooking in restaurants, all my colleagues were either Mexican, Honduran, Guatemalan, Salvadoran, and so
I read about that.
Yeah, I was totally enamored by the food that they would make. What we call family meal, which is meal put up for the employees. I would, on my days off, I would go and make tacos and stuff with their families and eat at their homes. And that was just a really special part of my upbringing. Obviously, San Francisco has so many different Latin American cuisines, but also, just like these amazing restaurants. And I grew up eating at taquerias, very casual tacos and burritos and quesadillas. So that's all kind of part of my food DNA. I mean, honestly, I don't have there's no cuisine I would say that I really grew up with, because in San Francisco and America you have everything. You got, Chinese, Mexican, everything. But I think the one that I most closely associated with was probably Mexican food. And then my dad is Puerto Rican, so there's that whole side of the things that his family would cook, and things that he would cook, and the flavors from Puerto Rico. Which are really exciting because they're Caribbean, right? So lots of spice and, Scotch bonnet and habanero chilies and things like that. So those are all sort of expressed here, not really as fusion, but just in the same way that I wouldn't say that anything at Americano is necessarily traditional. Mm-hmm. It's just inspired by those flavors. It's the same here at Otra, where we're just heavily inspired by that. So you might see a little bit more chili
Yeah.
You know, you might see a little bit more lime and things that make the flavors really pop. But it's all kind of using the same, I guess, cooking philosophy, which is to highlight the ingredients, to showcase a little bit of technique, so that these are dishes that people can not make at home.
Yeah.
So it makes it special to eat out, but also to make it very, very approachable and delicious first and foremost. You know, like our chicken and rice, or something that, you know, chicken and rice. Every culture has some kind of chicken and rice, but I think ours is just insanely delicious and highly technical.
So while you were experimenting and deciding the menu for Otra, was there any dish that you were excited about, but you didn't include it in the menu because it didn't work well?
No.
No?
No. And I think this is something that really kind of hit home for me when I was in Bangalore,
Okay.
because I was really inspired by all the creativity and all the risk taking that I saw in restaurants there.
Yeah.
And I think part of what enables that is real estate. So if you spend less on your rent, you can afford to be slower, you know, until people kind of catch on. You can afford to take more risks.
So you're going to be opening in Bangalore soon?
No, like I said, I'm very comfortable in Kalagota, and you know, I'm a bit lazy as well.
Yeah.
But no, I think that we took a big risk because historically, in this, you know, when we first opened and we were getting asked all these questions and we were doing the whole kind of PR launch, everyone asked, you know, historically, Mexican food doesn't do very well. You know, most of the restaurants have closed, so why are you doing that? And so it was a risk to open this. Again, we're not a Mexican restaurant, but we are certainly inspired by that cuisine. And it is a risk, and we're doing it in a very risky city because the real estate is expensive, the rentals are high, overheads are high. It takes a lot of people to make this work. And also none of the ingredients, I don't say none, but many of the ingredients were not available, and we had to either, you know, basically grow them ourselves or put some infrastructure in place. So all in all, it was actually a really risky project, and I think that it has paid off because, you know, we are growing this amazing corn in Punjab, and you know, we're making our own tortillas, and I mean, it's just, there's so many special things that we do that we don't really talk about because I'm a bit shy and we're a bit quiet about what we do, because I just want people to come in and experience it. But, you know, it's...
But how did you find this 3-1 farms in Punjab for your corn, and what makes their produce stand out?
Well, so it's actually the relationship. So Anushka and I, we've known each other for some time. I met her first. She had come to do a talk at Subco.
Okay.
And she was talking about different varieties of wheat. But the way that she was talking about them, you know, clearly she is an obsessed person. She has the sickness that we have. She's obsessed, but she's also highly intelligent and very motivated. So we started talking. We started using some of her wheat products, some of her flours. And I'd always had this dream. I mean, this is going back till, you know, probably 2011 when we first started doing menu stuff at the table. I always wanted to make a good corn tortilla. Just like the ones that I grew up eating. Yeah. But okay, obviously I had no idea how difficult that process really was. But I thought that maybe I could find like some, you know, masa flour, the masa harina, and make tortilla. I mean, I had a very sort of naive understanding of the process that goes into making tortillas. But anyways, I thought that I could make that. Never had any success with that. So that was always like this unfinished business. So one day I kind of started speaking with Anushka about this, and we didn't have a restaurant at that point, but we'd had some success with a taqueria pop-up that we did over the pandemic. And I said, you know, if you would consider growing corn or getting corn for us in some way, then I might consider doing something with it. That was sort of, you know, it was very vague. Yeah. You know, within a month, she had read like every scientific journal on not only maize, but growing maize and the different kinds of maize and maize production in India versus abroad and history. And, you know, she had these like Google Drives that she was sending me. And I was like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? Like, I can't read this fast. There's so much information. But of course, by that point also, I had started doing trials. And so she started sending me all sorts of different varietals of corn. some with more starch, less starch. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with all that, but basically, in a very primitive way, we were making tortillas with different types of corn, trying to decide ultimately which one would be the best to plant or to grow. And it was interesting because at that time, we didn't know if we weren't getting good tortillas because of the corn, or if it was because of the equipment that we had, or because of our lack of know-how or lack of experience. I mean, there were all these variables, which, if you're doing scientific experiments, variables are not your friend. So this was a bit of a trying time, but we had all these graphs and charts that we made, and we were able to kind of shortlist it to a few, and so we've got all that corn growing now. And one day she's like, "All right, listen, we've got 1,000 kilos ready," and I'm like, "Oh my God!" And then I called her back and I said, "I've signed a lease. Get it ready." So, Otra is as much an expression of, my Latin American heritage as it is really the product of, being obsessed over making a good tortilla. And this collaborative effort with Anushka and 3-1 Farms.
Sure. And then can you tell us more about this fresh masa and nixtamalization, is it?
Yes.
Do you want to share a little bit in brief about what this
Yeah.
process
So, I mean,
is?
I won't nerd out completely, but it's it's probably 5,000 years old or older. But at some point, somewhere around, Central America, it was discovered. I'm sure this has happened in many communities simultaneously, but at some point it was discovered that by treating corn, maize, particularly, not sweet corn, like the tender corn, but the grain, the maize, by treating that with an alkaline solution, you can make it more digestible. So what was happening in Italy, there's a disease called pellagra, right, which is a niacin deficiency. I think it's B12 or B6, where you're eating polenta, right? You're eating corn, but your body is not getting any nutrients out of it. So you feel full, but it has all these other side effects because you're not getting the vitamins that you need. Whereas with nixtamalization, it becomes bioavailable. It means your body can process it and turn it into these healthy vitamins. So it's highly digestible, but it's also nutritious, which now doesn't really matter, right? So we don't do it for nutrition now. We do it because it tastes really good. But back in the days, 5,000 or plus years ago, it was really important because they would have put a lot of effort into growing this, and so if this is the only food that you have, it needs to count. So at that time, they probably would have used ash, right? So I have this like image in my mind of them boiling this corn over a wood fire, and someone accidentally getting a log in there of ash, and then suddenly finding, oh, hey, look, actually it makes it more nutritious. But who knows how it actually happened. So now what we use is something called calcium hydroxide, which is it's limestone, right? It's similar to tuna. It's not quite the same thing, but we get like a food grade calcium hydroxide. One of the concerns with it is that it has, if you don't get food grade, it has things like lead and arsenic in it. So you want to make sure that it's food grade, which enough people probably don't realize that. And then we treat the water that we cook the corn in with this calcium hydroxide. And by soaking it overnight, it starts to make the skins more tender. So there's this little pericarp on the outside that comes off. And then we kind of rinse it off, and we have this lava stone grinder. It's a big, 5 horsepower machine that we had made from a Mexican man in Los Angeles. And it makes just these beautiful, stiff dough that's very fine. So the fineness is really important because the finer the dough, the softer the tortilla.
Lovely. And even your kitchen ferments pizza dough for 4 days to develop a unique taste, right?
Yes. So, I mean, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 days. And the reason I say this is because we have a very, very small kitchen and an even smaller refrigerator. So depending on how busy we are, I mean, we shove that thing full of dough. But I would say that anywhere between 2 and 4 days, depending on how busy we are, because if we sell more pizza, then we have less dough, means it's fermented for less time. but always at least a couple days. And this is not a sourdough pizza dough. We use a little bit of commercial yeast. So, in a batch this big, we use like one little pinch of commercial yeast. We inoculate the starter with that,
Yeah.
and it gives us a very consistent product versus sourdough pizza, which is while delicious, very difficult to control and too risky considering we sell 150 pizzas a day. So.
So there's something different and interesting in your printed menu at Americano. You say, as a young chef, I cooked to impress. My ego was on the plate. My life was about control and discipline. The menu is about giving up control and celebrating simple things in life. So tell us more about this. And when you say you leave the ego at the door, what life lessons led you to that?
Well, I think I've touched on some of those already.
Yes.
Just not being a jerk.
Yeah.
And that translates not only into how you lead others, but how you are with others, thinking too highly of yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we know ego, like being egotistical, but also just thinking from this very self-centered point of view.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that, with social media, it's become part of cooking now, is like showy food, which is really just meant to impress.
Yeah.
Or I see it as something that, young cooks do, right? Look, I've learned all these techniques and I want to put them on the plate. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that because you're young and you want to prove yourself, or you're young and you want to try new things. All that is good. I just think that for me, as an expression of my maturity and where my journey as a person, not even as a chef, as a person, how I've evolved, these are the kind of things that I gravitate towards. Like a very well-made bowl of pasta that has all the technique and thought that you need in it, right? It's well-made pasta. It's a beautifully rolled shape, handmade, lots of love and care, and it's cooked perfectly and it's seasoned right in its ideal form. I'm not saying every bowl is perfect, but in its ideal form, it is an expression of what I think good cooking is. So then we don't need other stuff.
Yeah.
You don't need superfluous garnishes
Fancy,
or other things. That it's good enough. A roast chicken, when it's right, is really good. And when people tell me that our roast chicken is the best they've had, I know we've done something right. To me, that is what cooking is. It speaks to you in a way that something that just looks pretty or looks impressive can't. And so I was encouraged. The person who did our menus, who did all of our branding for both of our restaurants, he's Malika's brother, so we're very close. And it was like literally the night that we were printing menus on our either our opening night or maybe one of our friends and family trial dinners. And he's like, just put a note on there. And I was like, oh, I don't have time for this. He's like, just sit down somewhere and take 30 minutes and write a note. And I literally wrote it in like 5 seconds. I don't know why. It just came out. And it was something that was just so honest because
Straight from the heart.
I think, and it speaks to people, it's just something that really,
it does.
Again, there's junk food and there's comfort food, and then there's fine dining and there's haute cuisine and somehow there seems to, it's like there's no gray area. But I guess what I'm trying to show with both of our restaurants is that there is a place for food that is very thoughtful and maybe even technical, that expresses very, very sound cooking technique, but that's neither junk or just pure comfort food, pure soul food, just grub, and neither is it like really, really fancy, off-putting, exclusive dining. It's just really, really good. I think there's a place for that.
Yeah. Also, in your brief of the restaurant, there is always gratitude towards locals, artisans. What's the story behind that?
Well, I think if you talk to any good chef, they're all going to say the same thing, which is that their cooking is ingredient based. We don't really think so much about that because we still, we're always giving our attention to the chefs, and the chefs are important, but we are nothing without the ingredients. I mean, I can't tell you this restaurant would not exist without the ingredients. And when I say that, they're like, oh, come on. No, I mean, if I didn't have relationships with our growers, uh, we would not have corn. We would not have tomatillos. We would not have the chilies that we need to make our
I agree.
salsas. So at its most basic, I mean, my life is in their hands. My professional life is in their hands. But also, I think about the things that I love as a chef. Or if they say, what would your last meal be? Oh, I would love a plate of oysters, or these are luxuries, and this is not some technical dish that someone has created. This is a natural product that people are either growing or rearing or whatever it is, and because of them, we get to eat really delicious things. So that's why I always feel like my job is to kind of process these ingredients with a bit of care, not manipulate it beyond recognizability,
Mm.
and really do justice to it, not to mask it.
What's your favorite South American dish?
South American dish. Well, I mean, I guess ceviche. I absolutely love raw fish, in any form. So ceviche is probably my number one.
Your fellow chef once said, Alex knows how to make a lot from a little.
Mm.
Is it just your style, or does it reflect a food ideology when you were growing up?
So it's both, right? It's less is more, and I think also it's a natural progression that I think is fairly common is in any creative field. Is sort of as you learn more about what you do, you kind of start stripping off the things that aren't
Yeah.
required and just making it purer and purer. So less is more. But also, I don't like confusing flavors.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's about resourcefulness. We don't get all the ingredients that we need, or maybe they're not the quality that I am expecting. So then you need to figure out how to
Make
how
the
to
best.
make them delicious.
Yeah. So what's it like to have trained under some of these best chefs like David Kinch, Daniel Hum, Michael Mina,
Hmm.
and any lessons learned while working with them?
Yeah. I mean, they are all so different and they're all so talented. And I think the biggest lesson from working from all of them is that there's no one way to do it, and that's why I have to catch myself sometimes, because I think, I expect people to do what I did and work for 20 years before they open their restaurant. And then I speak to people who have no experience and they come into the kitchen and I say, well, what are your goals? 5 years, 10 years? Well, in 5 years, I want to own my own restaurant. And I think, well, geez, that's not enough time. But, everyone has their own journey. It's well documented that Heston Blumenthal, who's one of the most important chefs of the last couple generations, he's self-taught. Now, okay, fine, he's maybe worked at a few restaurants before he opened his own, and he had plenty of books and material, so you could argue that's not maybe being self-taught. But bottom line is he probably didn't work very long before opening the most important restaurant in the world, Fat Duck. So I have to catch myself from telling young people to do it like I did it, because all of my mentors, who were all amazing and completely different from one another, did it their own way.
Wonderful. Is there any favorite chef from around the world that you have?
Oh, I mean, there's just too many. But if there was one chef that I could have either worked for or met in my life,
Yeah.
I'm highly inspired by Jean-Louis Paladin, who is a French native, but he made his name in the U.S. in Washington D.C. He worked at the Watergate Hotel, and he's just widely regarded in the 80s, 70s, 80s. He's widely regarded as just one of the most important chefs in America, because he gave the newer generation of French chefs a head start. So Daniel Boulud and Eric Ripert. He brought these chefs who are now, Daniel Boulud and Eric Ripert are two of the most important chefs in New York. They're also of French origin. And so many talented people have worked for them. Thomas Keller also says that, one of the best meals, most memorable meals he had was at the restaurant was called Jean-Louis at the Watergate. He's just one of these guys who, again, talking about making a lot out of little, being resourceful. He came to the U.S. when there was nothing, or there was very little, and he had fishermen go out and hand dive scallops and all these things, which now you see on every single menu. He was the one who went out and made these relationships with the farmers and the fishermen, and the ranchers, and got all these beautiful products, which have now become part of the culinary lexicon in the U.S. So I have so much respect for him. Unfortunately, he passed away, so only from memory and from books will we be able to access his knowledge. But yeah, he's an amazing chef.
So dispel the myths around Michelin.
Michelin is so important for so many reasons, because from I think purely from a nostalgic standpoint, it connects us to our past, and I think for so many European chefs in particular, it has this weight that pushes them beyond beyond to chase these stars, and the result is that we get these better culinary experiences. And I think when you have a standard bearer like Michelin, or maybe the world's 50 best restaurants, what it does is, whether or not you want the stars or whether or not you want to be on the list, it's, high tide raises all ships. Like, I think just slowly over time, it increases the quality of all dining, because, you have all the skill and the ideas at the sort of the very pinnacle of dining. And these might be the 3 Michelin star restaurants, but then the people that work for them, or through their teachings or through their books, or maybe through Instagram now, those ideas kind of trickle down, and then they make their way into, I mean, I was trained in the Michelin system, and I don't have a Michelin star restaurant, but I think obviously a lot of those teachings and ideas somehow come through in the quality that we have. So if those guides didn't exist, then people wouldn't have something to reach for and something to push them. So it's important in the same way that criticism, restaurant criticism, wanting to get 3 stars or 4 stars in the New York Times or whatever it is, it's all important to kind of give us some goals. But we just have to be careful, because just because something is 1, 2, or 3 stars doesn't make it objectively better than something else. It is just, one viewpoint. Yeah. Right. So ultimately, what makes a great restaurant, and this is the same with the lists and everything, this is why I always check myself and I always check my team. Great, be happy that you're getting awards, or be happy that you're getting on lists or whatever, but you're only as successful as the last plate of food you put out. You're only as successful as the last happy guest to leave the restaurant, and it's really about working at it every day, staying humble, making relationships with your regulars, because it's what happens in the restaurant that counts. It's not the awards.
Would you like to share any teachings from the Michelin restaurant that you worked? You were mentioning that there are maybe 1 or 2 important things that you've learned.
I mean, everything, not everything important, but so many of the important things that are just part of my DNA now. But the one thing that I am at odds with in being a more kind, more gentle leader is that it is difficult sometimes to instill discipline in others. And that's the one thing that they drill into you in the Michelin sort of system, and the restaurants that have Michelin stars, is, you work long hours. No matter how tired you are, you push through, you move quickly, you work cleanly, you keep your knives sharp, you show up early, or you show up at least on time. Like, all this discipline is really essential. I mean, I think if anyone in any field applied these to their lives, they would be a better person. Certainly professionally. And so these are things that I really cherish. And in fact, as a kid who probably needed some discipline, this was really good for me in terms of maturing and becoming an adult. But it also came with a bit of abuse, and it came with, physical, not physical from them, but it's physically abusing to your body to, work 16 hours, drink coffee all day long, not eat right. I mean, it takes its toll. But also, verbal abuse from them, and, and negative consequences, and intimidation, and all these kinds of things that we were talking about. So I wish I could just say, listen, you have to have all these qualities, but I know that I learned them under fire. So it's hard for me to say, look, I'm going to be nice to everyone, and I'm not going to raise my voice, but at the same time say, I want you to possess all these qualities. So my biggest piece of advice, or the one thing that I wish I could just translate instantly to anyone from my experience, would be that you just need to have this discipline. But I think it's also something that, like, it has to kind of be drilled into you. So
And what's that magic spice according to you which can do wonders for any dish?
I think lime juice.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too for
Yeah,
some reason.
more so than salt. I mean, you can't have food without salt, but salt is like salt doesn't add anything. Salt just makes things taste more like themselves. But lime juice, like,
Your hot sauce series on quick guides to chilies,
mm.
their fermentation or sauce essentials are very interesting. So, how did you come about these, and do you see yourself on TV sometimes in the future?
Well, first of all, does TV even exist anymore? I don't even know how
I
people get their information. I guess YouTube or
yeah, I meant
or
that.
Reels. I don't know. I think at some point I wanted to maybe explore that, but now I wouldn't even know what to do because when I was a kid, the stuff that I loved watching was the very old school. This is the cooking setup, and you have someone staring at the camera going, and now I'm going to add this, and then they stir it around. But now that's not the
It's
guy
changed.
the guy the
Yeah,
guy in the kitchen cooking is not really doing that anymore,
yeah,
right? It's a lot of these short clips and close-ups and
yeah,
so it's a little different now, and
yeah.
I don't know what I would be able to bring to the table in that sense. But I guess there's always that romantic idea of maybe ending up on TV. But when I first moved here, we were going to put a burger on the menu. I was like, I'll only put a burger on the menu if we make our own ketchup, and it was like uh, people would ask uh, for Tabasco to put on the dishes, and I'd be like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
we're not going to give them Tabasco. This food doesn't go well with hot sauce. And then I realized they wanted hot sauce. So I said, okay, they want hot sauce. I'll make my own hot sauce. So everything was like, we make everything. We don't buy anything in jars. We don't buy prepackaged stuff unless
Yeah.
it's a product that we can't make, like olive oil or vinegar or something. We've even made our own vinegar. Didn't turn out very well, but we made it. So uh, that idea of making hot sauce is just something that kind of spiraled out of control. Really, I started making a very simple hot sauce that was just chilies boiled with vinegar and salt. To okay, how do they actually make Tabasco? How do they make other hot sauces? Okay, these are complex, fermented sauces. Some of them aged in barrels for years, and okay, how intense do I want to make things? But yeah, it's to the point where we made some really really delicious fermented hot sauces, and we make we make our house hot sauce at Americano. We make a slightly different one here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just become a little bit of a passion project.
Have you had a chance to cook for any celebrities? And is there any regular at your restaurant? And is there any favorite dish of theirs?
We do have some,
Mm-hmm.
but I think in the same way that we protect their anonymity when they're in the restaurant,
Yeah.
I respect their privacy
Sure.
when they're not.
Yeah.
And I'm not much of a name dropper, but it's actually it's an interesting question because the top restaurants in the country, whether you're in Bangalore or Delhi, like you're going to see a fair amount of celebrities, and of
Yeah.
course we're in Bollywood, so
Yeah.
I mean, well, we're we're across the ceiling from Bollywood. Um, so we do get our share, but I think the problem is these guys, they're not able to have much of a personal life, right? They're not able to celebrate in the same way that we do because they're followed everywhere by paparazzi and,
Yeah.
and people. And so I
Yeah.
think actually when it comes to celebrities, what I love most is like shoving them away in the corner. Unless of course they want to take pictures with people and they want the attention, but I love shoving them away in the corner, not letting anyone going and take pictures with them because they do, at least most guests they do ask us first, hey, can I go? And we say, no, 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 just let them be. But I think they deserve, the same
Privacy.
privacy that any of us want,
Yeah.
when we go out to dinner. I mean, I'm not really a celebrity, but I obviously have a lot of friends in restaurants, and sometimes I just want to go out to dinner with my wife, and not really chat about business. So
Mm.
it's give them their
If you do
space.
go out with your wife, where do you go? Is there
We,
any
we have a
favorite?
we have a few places that we love. We love Izumi. They're very very dear friends of ours, and I just respect. Chef Narisha and I share, I think, a similar philosophy of just good product, treating it well, not getting in the way,
Yeah.
not letting your ego get in the way. And she's there all the time. She's just such a hands-on chef and deserves a lot of credit. And I think both O Pedro and Bombay Canteen are just wonderful restaurants. Their form of hospitality is just unbelievable. And now Papa's, which is a bit more of an experience. It's just it's I know what it takes to put a restaurant together, and I know that it's a lot more than just the food. And so when everything comes together, it's always really, really impressive. And of course, I love Trishna, Shri Thakur Bhojanalaya. I mean, there's too many to name, but we're blessed with good restaurants in Bombay. Mask, La Loca Maria, they're all good.
Have you done any cooking with unusual or experimental ingredients, like maybe insects, Amazon insects, something?
No, see, I actually think that in cuisines, cultures, where there's a context for that, I think it makes a lot of sense. I have really no issue with that, but for me, it would feel dishonest maybe using them, because I have no reason to be cooking with them personally, because I've never worked with them. And whereas, yeah, of course, when I was training and experimenting with new ingredients, there is that bit of discovery that comes with using new ingredients. But these are packaged ingredients that are readily available. Now, if I was to go and try to find someone to get, fire ants to start experimenting with my own restaurant, I feel like I was chasing a trend or something. It wouldn't feel right. That said, I have had them, and they're pretty good. They taste pretty good.
Wonderful. One dish that never disappoints the guests at your restaurant.
Well, okay. I mean, obviously, the corn ribs at Americano are just like they've taken on a life of their own. And they really are good. I've kind of made a name for myself making vegetarian dishes. I had the zucchini spaghetti at the tables. It was like, using a vegetable to mimic something else. So now my new vegetable mimic is the corn rib. But it's really good. It's a really tasty thing, and it's easy to share, and it's very likable.
Lovely. What's a healthy oil for daily cooking?
Olive oil.
Okay. What's a classic vinaigrette according to you?
Queen Amman.
Okay. Obesity is now a challenge. What is your take? And what is your advice for the health conscious?
Just focus more on the quality of the food that you eat. So, I mean, let's not get into exercise. Let's not get into completely changing your diet, right? Or restricting calories. Just focus on at least what you're eating. It should be a whole food. It should be organic if possible. And by selecting better quality food, you're naturally going to weed out a lot of bad, unhealthy stuff that is probably contributing to that. But obviously, then, a lifestyle change is required.
What's the most important quality in a chef?
Honesty.
How do you become a top chef?
Ambition. You have to want to. Some people don't want to be a top chef.
Last question. Give us 3 simple tips on how to pair wine or cocktails with food.
So one way is, think matching colors, right? So something that is really heavily roasted, maybe meat might go well with a red wine, right? Something lighter fleshed, steamed or lightly poached would go better with a lighter color wine, maybe a white wine or a lighter red. I mean, that's very basic, but that might help. Another thing is, opposites work. So if you have something that's very rich and creamy, then something that is, maybe high acid would balance that well. So just like we like a squeeze of lime on something that's rich, right? Something that is acidic matches really well with something that is richer. And maybe another pairing suggestion would be that, as your meal progresses from lighter to richer, lighter in style to richer in style, so too with the wine. So you would start with lighter styles of wine and then progress into something richer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was so good to know you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been great. I'm sorry I talked too much.